This is the Des Moines Register presidential debate. The Republicans.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Washburn, editor of the Des Moines Register, and welcome to day one of the Des Moines Register debates. Today we're going to talk with 9 Republican candidates for President of the United States. The Democrats have spent lots of quality time in debates during this campaign, but this is the first time since summer that the Republicans have gone head-to-head in Iowa. And it's a critical time. 6 in 10 Iowa Republicans who say they expect to caucus told us just 2 weeks ago that they could still be persuaded to support another candidate. And now we're down to 22 days to go. So we're going to focus on issues Iowans say they still want to know more about. We won't talk a lot about issues like Iraq or immigration. They're important issues, no doubt, but Iowans say they know where the candidates are coming from on those. Instead, we'll dig in on issues that need more clarification. Iraq or immigration may come up because, of course, everything is interrelated, but we're not going to spend concentrated time on those. First, I'd like to welcome the candidates. Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of the city of New York. Congressman Duncan Hunter of California. Congressman Ron Paul of Texas. Congressman Tom Tancredo of Colorado. Former Senator Fred Thompson of Tennessee. Mitt Romney, former governor of Massachusetts. Former Governor Mike Huckabee of Arkansas. Senator John McCain of Arizona. And Ambassador Alan Keyes of Maryland. Thanks to all of you for being with us today, despite the ice yesterday. The rules are pretty simple. I'll ask the questions and let you know how much time you have. There are timing lights. You'll see a yellow light when you have 10 seconds left and a red light when it's please time to stop. I will try not to be a Grinch about it, but I do ask you to respect the time so that we cover as much ground as possible. I will offer up to 30 seconds of rebuttal time for any candidate criticized by name, and I may allow other candidates respond if we have time. I'll explain everything as we go along, so let's begin. We're going to start with a discussion about the financial situation facing our country, which was the single biggest issue Iowans of both parties wanted you to talk about. I'd like to ask everyone briefly to answer this question, and then we're going to talk more specifically. The Comptroller General has said the U.S. faces a tsunami of debt that is a great threat to our national security. Do you agree our country's financial situation creates a security risk, and why or why not? We're going to just go down the line, starting with Mayor Giuliani, and please limit your answers on this to 30 seconds.
I believe that it's a major problem, and it's one that hasn't been addressed the way it should be over the course of the last 7, 8, maybe really 20 years. And there are 3 major things that we have to do. First, we have to reduce government spending, and we have to be very disciplined about that. And we have to do it by imposing spending caps on the civilian agencies and governments, 5%, 10%, maybe 15%. We have to say that we're not going to rehire half of the civilian employees that come up for retirement. 42% are coming up over the course of the next 8 to 10 years. They should not be rehired. That would give us a $20 billion, $22 billion reduction. The other would even be higher. And then we have to reduce taxes. Right now, we should reduce the corporate tax. We should reduce it from 35% to 25%. It would be a major boost in revenues for the government. Most importantly, it would be a way of dealing with our fiscal policy in the same way that the Fed is dealing with our monetary policy to create more liquidity. And then there are other taxes we should get rid of. We should get rid of the death tax and a whole group of others, but the first one should be the corporate tax.
Okay, yes or no? I just want to be sure that I'm clear. Is the debt a threat to our national security?
I would say I would look at it.
Yes or no, please?
I wouldn't call it national security. I call it economic security. It's very, very important. I think of Islamic terrorism as being national security. Economic security is also very important.
There are 2 debts that are a threat to the national security. One is the budget deficit, which is going to be about $161 billion this year, but the real deficit, the real loss that we have right now that is a threat to national security is a trade loss. The trade loss this year is going to be $800 billion. It's going to be $200 billion to communist China, which is rapidly becoming our banker. And there's an old saying, you don't want to have a banker who doesn't have your best interests at heart. We should level the playing field. We should stop China from cheating on trade, bring back a lot of those high-paying manufacturing jobs to this country that we pushed offshore. That means bigger paychecks. That means more money going into the federal treasury and to Social Security and to Medicare. Eliminate those twin deficits, and we'll be on the right track.
Thank you. We do need to stay at 30 seconds. This is not the time to get behind. Congressman?
It's absolutely a threat to our national security because we've spent too much, we tax too much, we borrow too much, and we print too much. When a country spends way beyond its means, eventually it will destroy the currency. And we're in the midst of a currency crisis. Our dollar is going down rapidly as we speak. It's because we have lived beyond our means. We can't afford the foreign policy that we have. We have to cut back. We have to live it within our means. If we're going to spend money, we ought to spend it at home, and that is why we have to change this foreign policy. We can't afford it to do what we're doing today because it will destroy our dollar.
The reason why it becomes a national security problem is because the bulk of our imbalance of trade is a result of our importation of oil from countries that are not our friends. That's really where it rests. Most of the stuff, the rest of the stuff we bring in doesn't constitute that kind of threat to the United States. But when we are supplying the funds for the people in other countries that have an intent, a malicious intent, in regard to the United States, it's a national security issue. So, of course, energy independence is one huge step in the direction of trying to alleviate that problem.
Senator?
Our country has a $9 trillion debt. A good chunk of that is owned by China. We're bankrupting the next generation without any question. Every economist in Washington who's looked at it will tell you that. It affects our national security for one reason is because we're squeezing military spending. We're spending at below historic norms under these circumstances for our defense, and we're spending twice as much for entitlements. That's why I put out a specific Social Security plan that'll save Social Security while saving the government $4 trillion. It's all in entitlements. We've got to spend more for the military, as a matter of fact, but we've got to look at Social Security and Medicare and do some things now that won't hurt anybody badly, but will save it for the next generation.
Governor?
This is indeed a time of extraordinary challenges in this country, and the overspending in Washington and the overpromises that we made are certainly among those challenges. But this is not a time for us to wring our hands and think that the future is bleak. In fact, the future is bright. We need leadership in Washington that will rein in excessive spending, and we also need leadership that will help America grow. The best answer for our economic woes is to make sure we have good jobs for our citizens, good schools for our kids, good health care for everyone, and that we have policies that promote the growth of the nation. We can have a level playing field around the world, get ourselves off of foreign oil, reduce the excessive spending in Washington, and have a bright future for our kids. This, again, is based upon the strength of the American people. If you want to see a strong America, you don't look to Washington, you look to ways to strengthen the American people.
It's most certainly a national security threat because a country can only be free if it can do three things. First, it has to be able to feed itself. It has to be able to put food on the table for its own citizens. Secondly, it's got to be able to fuel itself. If it looks to somebody else for its energy needs, it's only as free as those are willing for it to be. And it also has to be able to fight for itself. It's got to be able to manufacture its own weapons of defense, tanks, airplanes, bullets, and bombs. When we start outsourcing everything and we're in that kind of a trade deficit, then just remember, who feeds us, who fuels us, and who helps us to fight, that's to whom we are enslaved. So if we can't do those three things, our national security is very much at risk.
Of course, any nation that no longer has economic strength, sooner or later will lose its military strength, so it's a national security issue. We have many trillions of dollars of unfunded liability. Obviously, we've been on a spending spree. We cannot increase taxes. If oil reaches $100 a barrel, which many people think it may, $400 billion of American treasure will go to oil-producing countries. Some of those monies will go to terrorist organizations. We have got to achieve energy independence, oil independence in this nation. I will make it a Manhattan Project, and we will, in 5 years, become oil independent.
Ambassador?
I think it's obviously a national